so let's go.
All right, we can admit for, yeah, okay. Buenos días.
Juanito Nari.
Buenos días.
All right, looks like we're live. So just double checking right now, is everybody in, or are people still on the waiting list? I mean, the waiting room.
In teatro, they call it the green room.
All right, I'm gonna admit everybody. Are we all good with that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, got you. All right. All right, all right. So we got about 47 people here right now. Okay. Welcome everybody. How are we all doing today?
Muy bien, muy bien.
Muy bien. Fantastic. So it looks like everybody's in, and I think that or we even got even more people coming in, even better. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually just get us started now. So first and foremost, I want to say to everybody here, thank you for being here. Thank you for helping us facilitate this fantastic event. It's a good day today. It's sunny outside. The air is nice and fresh, not too hot, not too cold. It's just perfect California weather, just in general today. So good morning, good morning, right? Yeah, not afternoon yet. I think that what I'm gonna do is, now that everybody's in right now, I'm gonna pass over the microphone to our translator, and they can talk a little bit about the language interpretation protocol, and we can start getting this going. Does that sound good?
Muy bien.
Compañeros, can you add Unión del Barrio as a panelist? Because you don't have them as a panelist.
Will do.
Yes, they are on the panel. Thank you.
So it looks like our translator's not here at the moment. So we'll get back to that. If anything, Citlalmina, do you think that you could help us by introducing yourself, as well as introducing Carlos, who's going to be speaking in a bit?
Buenos días a todos mis compañeros y compañeras. This is an honor to be here. My name is Citlalmina, a name that was given to me by the elders. Some people call me Quetzal, some people call me Maria Ortiz, but I'm very honored to be here. This is a program, this is the second program that we have people from San Jose has put out in honor of the August 29, 1970 Chicano moratorium. And we came about as a concilio Chicano moratorium, San Jose, to bring forth the history of struggle of the Chicano-Mexicano people in San Jose and throughout occupied territory. We welcome you. This is a discussion that must be given, must be done by a raza. We have to talk about ourselves, and we need to know where we're going based on our history and our struggle. Tierra y Libertad. And now I pass it on to Carlos, compañero Carlos, if you can introduce yourself.
Sí, bueno, pues buenos días, everyone. My name is Carlos Velázquez, born and raised here in San Jose, and you know, just really proud to be from this land, this indigenous land también, and have volunteered and dedicated a lot of my time to researching and sharing the history of our raza's contributions. So I just wanted to welcome everyone along with Citlalmina, to all of you for coming. We're happy to be in community with you all today as luchadores for a better world, and recognizing that we do this all right now during a pandemic compounded by wildfires, by racism, and with the added layers of distance learning and homeschooling. So we recognize this, but we also recognize that we're currently also energized by the movement of our juventud, of the Black Lives Matter movement, and all of our allies who scream for justice. I, along with Citlalmina, am a representative of the Chicano Moratorium Resistance Council, who are putting this event. And I just wanted to thank some of the folks who have come together to help make this event happen, along with Citlalmina. I also want to thank Adrian Vargas, Tepegua Vargas, Elisa Marina Alvarado, Guillermo Suarez, Jose Villarreal, Nava Auntie, and some of our panelists, Nannette Regua, Lisa Castellanos, Antayer Girasol, Brenda Rodriguez, Victor Vasquez, and as I mentioned, all of today's panelists. So thank you all for being here. I know that Citlalmina has already talked a little bit about who the council is and why we're doing this. Some of the other additional things that we do is that we envision a San Jose, we've come together as a group because we envision a San Jose where raza has economic stability and an education from and about el pueblo. We believe in the right to grow old in the place that we were raised, and to live in a place where our ancestors have contributed to. We want to foster a community where our young people know who we are culturally, spiritually, and politically, and understand the roles that each of us play in that. We want to foster a community where the safety of everyone is paramount, and we take action to do so. And we work to create a community that has its own institutions of culture, governance, and history. So thank you again for coming today. We are streaming this event through Facebook Live, and I know that we'll be sharing on the chat room a link for that if you want to share that and invite other people to join us in this plática today. And if you do wish so, you can also highlight it on social media. We are using some hashtags to link together the conversations. We'll be sharing that on the chat room también. So thank you again, and I just wanted to quickly introduce our MCs for this today's plática. Nava, who goes by the pronouns of they, them, is a student, artist, and organizer born and raised in the city of San Jose. As a member of MAIZ, their work focuses on a range of issues in the community. Nava works to build community to combat the issues that face us. And as an artist, they have worked in a variety of mediums, from film to music, with an emphasis on telling the untold stories at the intersections of oppression. So thank you, Nava. And again, I also want to introduce another of our MCs, Citlalmina, who spoke earlier. Citlalmina is the president of Centro Chicomoztoc, which is a nonprofit organization. She's a militant with the Barrio Defense Committee of San Jose, and has participated in several organizations and committees in the past, including the national organization CASA, which is the Central for Social and Autonomous Action. So thank you, Citlalmina and Nava.
Thank you. I appreciate the introduction. So what we can do now is let's acknowledge the audience. So like, once again, I know that people are still coming in right now. Thank you everybody for coming in today. You know, like there's a million things you could be doing on a Saturday, but the fact of the matter is we all acknowledge the importance, and this is just amazing. You know, typically a pandemic would have caused us to cancel this whole thing, but we figure it out. You know, we move things around. So is there any sort of thoughts that any of our audience would like to acknowledge about today? Any sort of things that you would like to state about today's Plática? You can either say something or put it in the chat. Looks like we got a lot of people here right now.
Hi, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
I apologize. Number one, buenos días a todos, pero I just got in late, as you might have noticed. Could you just like briefly recap in a minute what was talked about? That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're actually not that late. What we've been doing so far is introductions and letting everybody know just basically what we're going to be doing today. So you didn't miss too much important information. It's mostly just like introductions, letting everybody know, you know, things like that. If you have any questions further on going forward, you know, feel free to put it in the chat or something like that. We can take a look.
Okay.
But we're basically getting started. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Gracias.
So if anything, we can get started with our opening blessing. So it looks like I'm going to be handling that, right, Adriana? Okay. So let me reset myself so we can do this right. So let's take a gentle breath to remember that at the end of the day, we are settlers in occupied Ohlone territory here in San Jose, better known as the Tamian area, and that our responsibility begins in solidarity with the original earth stewards of this land. We humbly do this event as we live in comunidad with the original caretakers who love and respect this land. Because we too demand the liberation of our indigenous siblings through economic and land justice and having their basic human rights met, such as housing, health, food, water, and education. And most of all, free from state violence and much more. We want to acknowledge that our palabra and this opening blessing is not enough, but we believe in authentic relationship building and consciousness raising to get us to a place where we can all stand together in unity and true solidarity and complicit allyship for the liberation of indigenous peoples locally and around the world. Because even as settlers and allies, it means so much to be in the struggle of indigenous peoples, and to be in the struggle of indigenous peoples is to be in the liberation of all peoples. So we want to invite you to be present today. Please be with us in community and introduce yourselves in the chat, name, pronoun, location. A lot of you already did that. And we will proceed to share Zoom protocol, community agreements, as well as translation protocol. So I'm going to hand this off to Citlalmina now.
Well, welcome everybody. This is going to be a very interesting discussion. We have a lot to discuss in terms of who we are, in terms of this discussion has to do with identity. This discussion has to do with the liberation of our people. And on behalf of the Chicano Mexicano people, we need to have a discussion as to who we are in occupied territory, and I hope that this discussion goes, you know, throughout the, you know, these lands, so that we can move ahead and understand what we, you know, what we envision. You know, all of us are, you know, most of the Chicano Mexicano people are working people. We are a productive force within this occupied territory, and because we're a powerful and productive force, then we have a say-so as to what must be done. These are very important times of struggle throughout this continent, Nahuac and Tiwansinsuyo, and so we unite with all of the struggles that are going on throughout our continent and in the world for national liberation. So the following is that we also want to recognize many of our fighters, many of our people that have struggled for self-determination and national liberation. So we are asking people that we take a moment of silence for those compañeros y compañeras that stood up tall in the struggle for our national liberation. And, you know, we're going to have a moment of silence, 1 minute of silence. Thank you. Magdalena Mora, please say presente.
Presente.
Magdalena Mora was
Presente.
one of our beautiful, you know, militants that grew up in San Jose, and she was one of the inteligencias of the Chicano movement, and so she was also a member of the Centro Social Autónomo. And so we honor her. Ernesto Galarza.
Presente.
Presente.
Ernesto Galarza was also a compañero that organized throughout the fields of California. Well, he was one of the primary organizers of the farm workers. And he was also known as the father of bilingual education. Ernesto Bustillos. Presente. Ernesto Bustillos was the leader of the Unión del Barrio. He was also a revolutionary, and he participated within the Brown Berets and organized for Chicano liberation. Aurora Becerra.
Presente.
Compañera Aurora Becerra was also a revolutionary, farm worker, and also member of CASA. She was a militant, and she defended our gente throughout the state of California. Pablo Aceves.
Presente.
Pablo Aceves was also in leadership of Unión del Barrio, a national liberation organization, and he also participated in the borders, you know, fighting against the military forces of the Migra, of the police, and so we honor him as well. Ernestina Garcia.
Presente.
Compañera Ernestina Garcia was in the leadership of the Confederación de la Raza Unida and spoke on behalf of the Chicano-Mexicano people here in San Jose. Raquel Silva.
Presente.
Raquel Silva was also in the leadership of the Confederación de la Raza Unida. She participated in the Community Alert Patrol that observed the movement of the police armies that brutalized our people in the 60s. So we honor all these compañeros, and we honor them, and we can never forget them. They must be in our memory because they are the ones that followed the struggle of the 500-year struggle of our raza. Okay, we also honor our fighters in the revolution and independence of 1810, such as Miguel Hidalgo y Costilla, that declared that that our people must overturn the tyranny and monarchy of the European invaders. We honor Jose Maria Morelos, who also led a very important struggle and was instrumental in declaring that slavery had to be prohibited in Mexico. And so that was one of the reasons why after the Mexican nation was formed and became a republic in 1824, that the US government attacked the Mexican nation and stole half of Mexican territory in which we step on. We honor all of our women that participated in that struggle, in that revolution, such as Leona Vicario, who participated in that struggle. There were many, many women that fought in every way which we can think of, giving arms to the people, fighting in combat, cooking food for the soldiers, doing everything they could to fight in that revolution. We honor also Ignacio Lopez Rayon, who was also in leadership in that struggle. Ignacio Lopez Rayon came from Tlalpujahua, Michoacan, the land where Magdalena Mora was born. And his mother as well participated in that revolution. We honor Señora Josefa Ortiz de Dominguez, who also was in leadership in that struggle. So we honor the 16th of September, 1810, because we expelled one of the colonial imperialist European invaders. And this struggle continues. Tierra y libertad.
Y que viva Sofía Mendoza.
Que viva.
¡Que viva! Thank you, Citlalmina. So what we're going to do from here is I'm going to explain a bit of the Zoom protocol and process. So I'm going to try to quickly run through these just so that you all have an idea of how this is going to work. So this Zoom event is going to be recorded. Well, it is being recorded right now, and it's being streamed on Facebook Live at the moment. So feel free to click on your mute button to either have sound or to not have sound, just to make sure that, you know, some of us have background noise, so we wouldn't want to interrupt anybody who's speaking or anything like that. We will do a Q&A, and you can share your questions on the chat at that time. Otherwise, the chat monitors will try to catch your question and save it for the Q&A session. Type in chat to add ideas, comments, questions, shout outs, keep it lively, and be in community. We do have a tech team doing a few roles today, and I can provide technical assistance. Please reach out through chat. Also, turn off any other devices, the Wi-Fi, to maximize bandwidth, and you can be in Comunidad live without having to go mute video. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna type all these in into the chat so that you can have them written down. So going up from here is I'm gonna explain the community agreements. So today we're all going to garden together. We're gonna place ideas with the intention and within capacity to help it grow and give it life. We will respectfully interact and participate in Comunidad. We will also be open to learning and open to ways to get involved. We will respect the stories of people that people share and the vulnerability involved with that testimonio. We will foster an environment of appreciation, gratitude, while holding our critical lens to improve our work, our organizing, our comunidad, our health, and our quality of life. So going from here, I wanted to introduce La Profe. Do you think that you could unmute yourself and we can get started on that?
Absolutely. Good morning, buenos dias to everyone. Today, I'm Nannette Regua, and I am going to speaking about the Fiesta de las Rosas parade today. I'm going to share my screen with you all. We're going to take a look at a PowerPoint. I've been working on my research of the Fiesta de las Rosas parade of 1969 since 2011. And I'm very grateful to all the archivists and librarians, and also to collections in our community. I especially want to give a shout out to Doreen Garcia Nevel, who is the daughter of Senora Ernestina Garcia, who we gave a shout out to. Doreen is the archivist for the archives of the Confederación de la Raza Unida, and graciously shared documents that I'm going to show to all of you today, as well as documents from other archives and collections throughout the San Jose and Santa Clara County. I believe it's important for us to learn about events such as this very tragic parade in 1969, because we need to document our history. And if we don't document our history, others will do it for us. And sadly, many times they will portray us with negative stereotypes or depict us incorrectly. So it's so important for us to know our history and to document it and to share it. On June 21st, violence erupted at an annual parade. And this parade began in 1926. And the parade is kind of similar to the Pasadena Rose Bowl Parade. This was an annual event, and they had beautiful floats. And there were other festivities that were also celebrated. For example, there was a rodeo and a beauty pageant. And there was a grand marshal, a carnival, a horse show, you name it. It was something that was celebrated throughout the Bay Area, and thousands of people would come to celebrate it. This year in particular, in 1969, it turned violent. And it also put a spotlight on the rampant police brutality in San Jose. When I look at this parade in particular, many themes come about, and I've just listed a couple that you see here on the screen. There are examples of racial discrimination in San Jose. There are examples of police brutality. There are examples from this parade of violence against Chicanas, against women, and against children. There is also examples of economic inequality, social inequality, and political exclusion in our political systems here. And this parade demonstrates several of these themes among many. I want us to take a look at this. Is an early example of a program, and this was in 1927, and you can see how beautiful it is, the decorations for the Fiesta de las Rosas parade. And this is 1 year after the parades began. We can also look at, the image, and the image are of Spaniards. Right, that's what is highlighted on this image. Well, let's keep that in mind as we progress our discussion about this parade in 1969. This was a full page ad in the Oakland Tribune, the year of '69, and if you see on the left-hand side, that full page, look at all of the events that are taking place during that week. And it is the week leading up to Memorial Day weekend. So this is the last days of May and to the beginning of June 1st when the parade happened. You can see on this ad, we have at the top are some coins that people can purchase to support the festivities. I want you to keep those coins in mind. And you can also see throughout the rest of this ad, there are images of the events. There's a carnival, there's a ball, there's a golf tournament, right? It sounds really exciting. Now, I want us to go back up to the top of this ad, and we can see that there are those coins. And the coins, they sell for about $7.50 for silver, and then bronze is $1. And there are two sides to the coins. I've highlighted one of the sides of the coins on the right-hand side. Take a look at that image, right? And what do you see about that image of that coin? You can see that it is a celebration of a bicentennial of one of the first Spanish settlements in California, called Alta California, in 1769. And here we are celebrating that 200 years in 1969 in San Jose. And so these coins would have been available for purchase. And looking at this coin, who do you see? You see a Spaniard, a conquistador, right? A caballero, there he is. And then you see another Spaniard, a Spanish, a missionary, right? This coin is going to be a very important part of how the planning proceeded for the parade and how it eventually led to violence, and it contributed to the violence that sadly erupted on that day, on June 1st. Well, I want us to get a little bit of historical context. 1969 was the time period of the Chicano movement. It was also the time period of the grape strike, United Farm Workers grape strike. It was also the era of what had concluded as the Black Civil Rights Movement, also the Native American movement, the feminist movement, and also taking place in '69 was the war in Vietnam, in which we had unprecedented numbers of Black and brown young men who were sent to Vietnam to fight. On this image, this is an image of a protest rally of the Fiesta de las Rosas parade. Well, let's talk a little bit about how this protest came about. One is, I mentioned that coin. And so Chicanas and Chicanos in the community of San Jose and nearby areas saw that sign, saw that coin as being something that was denigrating to us because it highlighted our Spanish oppressors. Well, the planning committee for the Fiesta were using that sign, or we're using that coin rather, as a way to make profit. So the city of San Jose gave the planning committee of the Fiesta $31,000 that was taxpayer money. And the planning committee used that money to buy those coins to sell, and with their hope of recouping the cost. But Chicanas and Chicanos in the community said, wait a sec, you are selling those coins that represent our oppressors, and you are making a profit out of that, and you are discrediting our history and our culture. They went to the planning committee, the Fiesta planning committee, and asked them to stop selling those coins. The Fiesta planning committee said, no, we're going to continue selling those coins. The Chicano community also learned of a skit that was going to be taking place during the parade on June 1st. And the skit was of a Mexican peasant pulling a burro, while a Spanish caballero was yelling at the Mexican to hurry up and keep moving. Yet another example of denigration. So after repeated attempts to try to change the planning of the fiesta were unsuccessful by many Chicano and Chicana leaders, they decided to protest. And here is an example of a rally to protest the fiesta parade. And they also protested against that use of the coins for profit, because the monies, that 31,000, could have been used for our educational needs in the Latino community, and also for housing, for employment, for city services. East San Jose, many neighborhoods still didn't have sidewalks, street signs, right, stop signs, adequate health care in the east side. And so that 31,000 could have really been used for improving the community. So many of our community leaders, Chicano community leaders, decided to protest. Some attended events like this one, and some also decided to boycott the parade as well. Well, this is what happened on June 1st, 1969. Violence erupted. Now, as I mentioned, some folks decided to boycott, but some who initially decided to boycott ended up attending and wanting to peacefully attend the parade. But the San Jose PD had different intentions. There were at least 300 plainclothes and uniform police officers in attendance at the parade. The mayor, who had been asked by the Chicana community to change the denigration of this event of Mexican and Mexican Americans, the mayor, Ron James, responded by saying that Chicanos who were trying to protest were communists and only intended to cause trouble at the parade. So there was no support by the mayor. Right? Now, the police was at hand at this event, as well as a helicopter that was patrolling overhead, just waiting for something to happen. And something did. Some of the Chicano spectators mentioned that they heard a gunshot. Some also said that the police just started panicking and they started going into the crowds. They started using motorcycles against the community people in the parade, and then also spectators. They specifically, the San Jose PD specifically singled out Chicanos and Chicanas, and especially for Chicanas. I have interviewed several women who were there and who experienced violence at the hands of the San Jose Police Department. It seemed that women were singled out by the police because they knew that Chicanos who were there as spectators would respond and would try to protect the women. There were also children who came as well, came with their parents, and who experienced the violence as well. Let's take a look at some of the images that I have on our screen. One is we can see on the right-hand side, this is a Chicano, like a magazine, and we can see the cover. It's a San Jose Maverick, and it calls the Fiesta a Fiasco. And you can see in that image, there's a young man who is, has a chokehold around his neck by San Jose PD. We can also see that here is a woman on the left-hand side. We can see a woman who's kind of in between a police who's prepared with his baton and a Chicano. And perhaps she's trying to stop some type of violence that could occur. In this next image, we can see that there is, on the left-hand side, there's a man who has children with him, and he's being beaten by police, and several other are surrounding them. And you can see that there are children, perhaps his children, who are against the wall. On the right-hand side, we can see, here is a protester. He's peacefully protesting and he's holding a sign, but we've got the police that are ushering him away. On this image, we have several images here as well. We still have conflict, right? We have violence. We have arrests that are being made, specifically of Chicanos. Now, the San Jose PD stated to the San Jose Mercury News that that they had been abused. They had had rocks thrown at them. They had bottles being thrown at them. Somebody hit a police with a stick and hit him in the eye, and they responded. I mentioned a few minutes ago that there were women who personally experienced abuse, and so on the right-hand side is a quote from Dr. Concha Saucedo, who was there, and she describes how the motorcycle cops, she says, started to use their motorcycles as an instrument against us. They went into the crowds, knocking us down, pursuing us. It was mayhem. I saw the tactical squad coming from one of the side of the streets making a sweep. Parents had brought kids, and some had kids on their shoulders and were carrying them. She says, we started running and trying to help people. Dr. Saucedo describes that she was beaten to the ground by the San Jose PD. And what she had done is she had, even though she had decided to boycott, she came and she joined the United Farm Workers in the parade. But then she responded that she also heard a gunshot go off, and she saw police sweeping in, and they started physically abusing Chicanas and Chicanos. And her in particular, she was beaten to the ground, and only another Chicana came to her aid, and it was Dr. Consuelo Rodriguez, who picked her up off the ground, and they went running. We can see a woman who's beaten to the ground on the left-hand side, and she's on the ground with receiving help. And one gentleman, you have a quote from Father McEntee. Let me go back. Father McEntee, who was there. And he describes how the police he says they lost all discipline, right? And he had to personally ward off, he says, one blow at a woman. Thanks to La Confederación de la Raza Unida, many of the people who were injured at the hands of the police gathered together at a nearby park, and they said, let's meet tonight at Our Lady of Guadalupe Church off of San Antonio Street. And so that was the intent. And so La Confederación de la Raza Unida, members of it, came to that meeting that very evening, and they began keeping records. And here's a record that I have, and it's the list of people who were injured, right? And so we have a list here. I believe there was more than this. The San Jose Mercury News article on the right-hand side said there was about a dozen. I would argue there were more than that. Right? There were also many that were arrested. Here's one comment, and this is Lorne Green, and he was the Grand Marshal, and this is what he said about the parade. He said, Chicanos should not live in this country, and they ought to go back to Mexico where they belong, right? He's a famous actor on Bonanza at the time. That was his comment. Back to, here's our list from Confederación de la Raza Unida. Thank you for keeping their records. And here's lists of witnesses, right? Witnesses who saw the violence occur. I also checked to see that Father McEntee was there, and we had his quote, and there he is. He was listed as a witness. There were more than that, right? More witnesses than that, I'm sure. Here are arrests. There were arrests of 17 who were called protesters. And these are some of the reasons why they were arrested. And this is what the Mercury News documented of what they were arrested for, right? And it ranges from throwing items, disturbing the peace, assault with a deadly weapon, battery on a police officer. Well, thanks to Confederación de la Raza Unida, that very evening, as I mentioned, they had that meeting at Our Lady of Guadalupe Church, and they came together. At that meeting, it was so important because so many Chicanas and Chicanos who may not have been connected before came together in unity, and they decided that they were no longer going to be put up with these type of abuses, as they had been challenging police brutality for years before. But this was a uniting moment, right, for Chicanas and Chicanos. And as a result, we have a class action lawsuit that was issued by Confederación. And what this was it as a class action lawsuit, and it demanded that the Fiesta stop selling those coins that were denigrating to the Chicano community. As a result of this lawsuit, which was won, and many of the folks who were arrested, the charges were dropped. Some paid nominal fees of about $35. The other aspects came out of this, and that is that the Fiesta did not continue. There were efforts to have another one in 1970, but because of its denigration, because of the violence that had happened and the exposure of the police brutality, that it did not continue. What continued was the unity and the fight for our civil rights as Chicanas and Chicanos. That continued, and it will continue during the rest of the Chicano movement. Right? I'm going to pause here. Thank you so much for listening. There's so much more to talk about. If you're interested in the Fiesta, please continue doing research, and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much. I mean, while I was watching this the whole time, what I was thinking in my head was, wow, that was in 1969. And if we saw anything this past summer, just a couple months ago, SJPD hasn't really changed too much, except they have tanks now and big ass guns. But from here, I actually wanted to introduce somebody who can give testimonial who was actually there. So if we can actually introduce Don Adrian, who's going to share a bit about his experience and his testimonial from that fateful day. Don Adrian.
Gracias, Carlos. First of all, I want to clarify that I was not there. It brings to light a poem that was done in the 70s by Gil Scott Heron that says the revolution will not be televised. In fact, I was in high school when I saw the blowout portrayed on television. When I went to San Jose State in the summer of 1969, the first thing I did as a youth student, quiero decir algo importante de lo que es el coraje, to see your people blasted away. I mean, they took Sal Candelaria, the leader of the Black Berets, and arrested him for speaking Spanish incoherently. Can you believe that? And so that brought a lot of coraje to a lot of people. And the first thing I did when I went to San Jose State is I went to La Confederación de la Raza Unida. They assigned me to be the student rep from San Jose State to sit on the board for La Raza, La Confederación de la Raza Unida. And later I was organized to be selected to organize for La Confederación a tremendous amount of work that came out of La Confederación, which was made up now of about 25 or more organizations that stood in unity and struggled for a lot of things. I was instrumental in creating the concept for the Centro de Bienestar, which still exists in at the Garner Health Network, and which was, the first bilingual mental health service center. And from there, I organized for La Confederación the first California-wide health conference for indigent people. We fired the director of BMC at that time because they were conducting what do you call it? They were, let me put it this way, Mexicanas that didn't have the money because there was no insurance for them, that went into a hospital pregnant, they sterilized them after they delivered their child. And they had to sign something, even if it was an ex. And so we discovered all these things. And La Confederación de la Raza Unida, which I must say, the most important specific point of this Fiesta Fiasco was that it was an inciting moment for a lot of people to get organized, including students, including community, including a lot of elements that saw the tremendous racial injustice that was taking place in our community, and we had to mobilize. This is the lesson of us reacting to attacks from the police, because it was a complete, police riot. It happened here before it happened at the Chicano moratorium. And we had that experience. And I also want to say that in the organizing of the Chicano moratorium of 1970, people down there were consulting with people up here like Sofia Mendoza, Rachel Silva, that had already gone through the struggle and the experience of La Fiesta de las Rosas to how to prepare for such an event in case the police should riot in LA against the Chicano moratorium. That was a connection statewide that was organized. Y Rosalía Muñoz, que en paz descanse, was in daily contact sometimes with Sofia Mendoza, because we had the experience of having been attacked here. And again, the significance of that fiesta beyond the brutality of the police, beyond the absurdity of the arrest, beyond people surviving it, beyond closing it down forever, is that it created community organizers like myself, like many of the people that gave their all the rest of their lives for the movimiento. So we should understand that when we are attacked, it's not for just a behavioral thing. It is because it's a political thing. It is to keep us in the process of inequality. It is to keep us in unjust conditions. And that is part of the whole process of liberating our people, because we are still oppressed. Not much has changed. And, it's just a repetition of history that's coming around again. We have to know how to strengthen ourselves, how to behave ourselves, how to mobilize ourselves to maintain the quality of our struggle so that it keeps up with attacks that are coming down now in a totally different era, in a totally different way. And if you see right here, this poster, that's the Tezcatlipoca. That's your reflection. That's your knowledge. That's your understanding of your history. It's in our blood. It's in our veins. And it's a tragedy that now we live in an environment here in San Jose, which, for example, the Paladin statue still stands. Let's take it down. Let's take that Paladin statue down because it represents the same thing as the Columbus statue for us in San Jose. And when we did the march in a week later against the police, yes, we did do a sit-in on the police department because we told them, going back 1 year where you attacked us at the Fiesta de las Rosas, do not dare attack us again the same way you attacked the people in LA, because we're not going to take it.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Thank you. So from now, we can introduce actually Don Guillermo as well. So let me make sure that I have this here. Okay, for sure. So Senor Suarez is originally from Gilroy, California, and actually became active since high school. He continued to organize as a student and machista while at San Jose State University, and as a law student at UC Berkeley, Cal, and soon after became a community organizer in the Bay Area, nationally and internationally. Do you want to speak a bit about your experience, Don Guillermo?
Well, yes, pero I was asked to speak about the question of self-determination, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm sorry, is there like a mute or something on the sound, on the audio? I get like an echo.
We can hear you.
All right. You know, I want to thank the professor and Don Adrian for the words they shared with us. It's very enlightening. You know, I think that it goes that they each in a way address the question of self-determination. The professor pointed out how at that time Mexican Americans and Hispanics organized this Fiesta de las Rosas or protested it. But from there, our people, our movement, because that's what we need to address, is our people and our movement. We moved away from those terms and chose for ourselves to call ourselves Chicanos, Chicano Mexicanos, Chicanos, because we were calling out ourselves, we were identifying ourselves, naming ourselves, if you will. That's part of self-determination, is for us to take control over our lives. But by now, I think that we need to understand that the question of self-determination is more profound, is deeper than just individually naming ourselves or individually choosing how we self-identify. The question of self-determination is linked to the question of national liberation. And those are both linked to the question of nations, right? And so we need to see that the question of self-determination for us as a people, as a nation, is a question of being able to control the economy, being able to control the political system under which we operate. So that means for us that we need to overthrow the settler colonialist United States government, the settler colonialist political system that has been imposed on us. In that process, we need to struggle and we need to be united. And so for that reason, the question of self-determination is important, as is the question of national identity, because it goes back to the issue of nation, the question of nationality. Who are we as a people? We have always been Mexicano, but in the 60s and 70s, we began identifying as Chicano as a political statement against the U.S. government to say, hey, we're brown, we're proud, we're not part of the U.S. mainstream, we're not assimilationists, we have always been who we are, and we are now struggling for our civil and human rights. And so that today, the struggle continues. We can see all around us. I believe it was the professor who mentioned, or no, it was the compañero Adrian, who mentioned sterilization of Raza women. Well, that's still taking place. You should have seen on the news that ICE, the migra in Georgia has been sterilizing women against their consent. They didn't know, right? It's the same thing happened in Los Angeles. There was a big scandal when it was discovered that the county in Los Angeles was sterilizing women against their consent. And as Adrian said, they make them just sign, put an X, and so the procedures happen. In the situation that the ICE is sterilizing women continues to this day. It continues to this day because women are not recognized, women are not appreciated as human beings. It's like the system says, they can do whatever they want with them. Yes, it's the self-determination and national liberation is what it's about. It's about reclaiming our homeland, reclaiming, for me, and Chicano-Mexicano resistance, of which I'm a part, is reclaiming the 50% of the national territory that was stolen from us in an imperialist war, with the manufactured, created war. I mean, there's so much more I could go into, and it may be deserving of a own separate discussion, but we need to understand what is self-determination. The question of self-determination is not just about individuals. It's not about me today saying, call me in this way. No, it's about my people, but it's about a nation. It's about our nationality. What does it mean for us to be self-determined? We need to address the question, self-determination for who? Self-determination from whom? Because self-determination doesn't just exist in the vacuum. It's concrete. It's a political struggle. Self-determination is a political struggle. So when we say self-determination for the Chicano people, it is a political struggle for us to reclaim, some of us say Aztlán, some of us say occupied Mexico, some of us say occupied native territories. And all of those are correct. We need to struggle for the liberation of those territories, that land, however we define it. We need to struggle against U.S. imperialism, against U.S. settler colonialism. And I apologize for just dropping all these terms on folks, but I was told I have a limited amount of time, so I'm just trying to address the issue that I was asked to do, and hopefully the panelists will be able to pick up on some of these terms and some of these concepts and develop them further in their allotted time.
Thank
but
you
the
so
question
much.
of self-determination, I tuned that's my cue. Self-determination is a political question, bottom line. That's what it is. It's a political question that must be addressed from a political point of view. It's a question of colonized nations struggling against the colonizer, the colonizing nation for their national liberation. And with that, let me just say that in terms of remembering people, we should also remember Ruben Salazar, Lynn Ward, Angel Diaz, the last two brown berets who died in the National Chicano Moratorium of 1970. They must not be forgotten. We need to remember them as well.
Yes.
And there's also Corky Gonzalez out of Colorado that, even though some of us may disagree with him in his later years, we need to, we need to commemorate him as well. And let's just remember that the Fiesta de las Rosas police riot predated the police riot on August 29th, 1970.
Yes.
Gracias.
Thank you so much, Don Guillermo. Something that I want to point out once again is, like you mentioned, your whole question could be a whole entire event on its own. I 100% agree with that. So thank you for sharing that that statement. So going on from here, we're going to introduce Lisa. So Lisa is a second generation Chicana Chicanx born and raised in California by way of Jalisco, Nayarit, and the Arizona Sonora Desert. The middle child of 7, Lisa grew up in downtown San Jose, child of a tailor and a cannery worker. They are a founding member of Mi Gente's National Leadership Circle and 100% Chicana. You can see a full bio in the chat. I'm going to be posting that.
Gracias, Nava. So the next 40 minutes, Vamos a entrar, we're going to go into plática and dialogue about identity and self-determination. But before I jump into that, I want to introduce my co-facilitator, Diego Gomez. Diego is born and raised in San Jose. He is a Chicanx poet and philosopher and a San Francisco State graduate working on his master's in philosophy at Erasmus University in the Netherlands. Check that out. That is amazing. Diego is also my nephew, full transparency. So it's a great honor to co-facilitate with him. So, our intention is for this panel in the next 40 minutes is to create a space in the spirit of the Zapatistas, where we're creating a space where un mundo donde quepan muchos mundos can kind of permeate our energy and our intention. Translation for that is a world where many worlds coexist. The respected Jamaican-born Black cultural and post-colonial theorist Stuart Hall said, "Language is a privileged medium in which we make sense of things, in which meaning is produced and exchanged."
O sea, you mean the words we use to call ourselves are the way through which we form knowledge about ourselves, about the world? Stuart Hall also proposes that identity can be seen as an ongoing product of history and culture, rather than a finished product. With that in mind, I'd like to invite us all to enter into a generative dialogue and deep listening. We will be introducing our panelists one at a time, casi todos, most of who are from San Jose. Each of our panelists will have about más o menos 4 or 5 minutes, 4 minutes preferably, to share their responses to the following questions. After that, we'll be handing the floor back to MC Citlalmina to moderate question and answer.
Gracias, Diego. So let's get started. And I just want to also invite the panelists to please introduce your name and your pronouns. We'll be dropping your bios in the chat. And our first panelist is Profe Jennie Luna. Dr. Jennie Luna was born and raised in East San Jose, California. She received her master's in education from Teachers College, Columbia University, and her PhD in Native American Studies at UC Davis. Bienvenida, Profe Jennie Luna.
Thank you very much. And so you wanted me to say my name, pronouns she, her, ella, and what was the last one? I'm sorry.
That was it.
Okay, thank you.
So, Profe, we want to share the screen, if we could share the screen. And there are 3 questions that we're asking all the panelists to engage for the next 4 minutes. I can share my screen, if that's easier. Here we go. So here are the questions. How do you identify? When did you choose to identify as such? And why is it important to you? That is the first question. The second question is, what is the impact of self-naming? And the third question is, what is the impact of the term Latinx in our communities, and especially queer identity and Indigenous identity?
Okay, well, first of all, I need to say thank you to all of you for organizing this, but I want to acknowledge growing up my formative years in San Jose, which really come back to my identity, has to do with the elders, and some of them are here on this call. Maria Ortiz, Quetzal, Adrian, Vargas. I was a young person growing up in San Jose, and these were the role models and folks that I was exposed to that really helped politicize me. So I identify as Chicana, and I came to my own Chicana identity really when I was in high school. And some of you may remember back then there was a radio program called Radio Aslan out at San Jose State. And so every Friday night, kind of listening to, some of them were Mechistas at San Jose, and I was a high school student, kind of listening to the messages, the speakers, professors from San Jose State were talking on the radio. So I think as a high school student, a freshman in high school, a lot of those ideas started to form. As I continued on in my high school education, I was very fortunate to attend a conference, which my other compañera, Adriana Garcia, we met through this conference, the Chicano Latino Youth Leadership Conference up in Sacramento. And that also kind of led me towards higher education, community activism, organizing. Upon returning, really got involved. There was a youth movement in San Jose in the mid 90s, late 90s, called La Raza Unida Student Alliance. And so a group of high school students, we would get together. This was right before the Rodney King riots. And we had representatives from all the high schools, and we would meet at Mount Pleasant once a month and talk about what were the issues in our community. Back then in San Jose, there was also Maria, the Barrio Art Gallery in the East Side on Camera. There was a lot of murals. There was so many things around me growing up in East San Jose that was popular education. It was a messaging that taught me about who I was. And so it was during my high school years that I began to identify as a Chicana with an X, and really making these connections to who I am as an Indigenous person. Also, this is around the time of 1994, the Zapatista uprising. We had 1992. Again, I was a high school student, and this is when there was a lot of movimiento around resisting what was taking place, the reenactment of the arrival of Columbus in San Francisco. And so that led to the culmination in 1993 of the high school student walkout. One of my other compañeras, Rebecca Armendariz from Gilroy, was arrested for helping young people participate in that walkout. And so these are the folks I was fortunate to be around in my formative years that really impacted my identity. So I know that's the first question, is how I became Chicana. It has to do with the people. And sorry, I should have written this down. And the second question, Lisa?
The second question is, what is the impact of self-naming?
Thank you. I just saw that you posted it. And so the impact of self-naming, and it's about self-determination, just what the compañeros talked about. It's about self-determination, that why do we allow for outside entities to determine who we are? And so I've always, this is something I teach my students, that identity is complex, but identity is self-ascribed, that we get to determine our own identities, not political borders, not the government. Identity is self-ascribed. And then because I know I want to make sure I respect everyone's time, I'll address the last question, which is the impact of the term Latinx, Latinx in our communities. I think I'll start with the fact, when I began to, in college, when I began to write Chicana with an X, there was a lot of folks that didn't like Chicana with an X or Chicano with an X. There was a lot of the professors like, that's not gonna last. What does this mean? And I was very intentional in writing in all my papers, because I really wanted to explore this idea of who I am as an Indigenous woman. And that X was symbolic for a lot of us young people in the 90s into the 2000s. And so I think that the one thing I can impart is that I know that there's always going to be intergenerational differences, conversations, maybe disagreements. And so what I would say is that for those of us who are young people who are embracing the X not only the X in Chicana or Chicano in the beginning, but the X in Chicanx or Latinx, that is, I want to listen to what the younger generation has to say. I want to learn from them. And it might, for a lot of us, it takes a little bit of time to kind of grow and understand. But I want to listen to what the young people are telling me, also thinking about be part of this movement to deconstruct, again, these colonial gender binaries and constructions that don't belong to us. Like, if we really want to understand that, then it's time, then the work we need to do is to go back to indigenous understandings and understand that all of it in the end, how we're operating is very much a Eurocentric way of operating around identity, around gender. So let's go back, let's really do the work and talk to more elders, do the research. And then I think as young people, even if our elders maybe disagree, that's okay, that's okay. I think as young people, we're also taught in our native traditions to respect our elders. And so we can respect them, but also be discerning, that it's our work, it's our job to be discerning, to understand, okay, this is the perspective. We may or may not change minds, but this is, you know, where we want to take it, and we can move forward still in unity, whether or not there are disagreements or desacuerdo with what's happening with the changes in identity. But identity is fluid. It's always been changing. I don't know what's in 10 years from now, there may be a whole other idea, a whole other term. So I think they're evolving, it's fluid. And so I'm gonna end there so I could allow for the next panel participants. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. And we're going to try to, keep time, keep this moving. There are quite a few panelists, so 4 minutes each. And I will be keeping time, and we will hold grace as we interrupt you if we get close to the 4 minutes. And I want to hand it off to Diego to introduce our next panelist.
Okay, muchísimas gracias. Our next speaker is Prof. Jefa Maribel Martinez-Willmes. Maribel Martinez is a queer Chicana, Purepetua brainiac, storyteller, and dream warrior. You can read a fuller bio in our chat. Welcome, Maribel.
Good morning, buenos días a todas, todos y todes. We give thanks to our ancestors for being here. As Diego mentioned, identify as an indigenous Chicana. My people are Purepecha, people from Tzitzuntzan via Guanajuato to East San Jose. Identify as two-spirit, queer, person of color, femme-presenting, deeply connected to women's spaces, but my sense of womanness is expansive beyond Western understanding. I use pronouns she, her, but prefer gender-neutral terms unless there's intentionality in calling out a specific gender. Identify as a child of Mexicanos who migrated to the US in the 70s and who were undocumented most of my childhood. I'm a granddaughter of braceros who crossed the border as laborers. I grew up in East San Jose, Story and King area. I'm an educator, organizer, writer, teatrista, nerd. I say shapeshifter because I permeate and move around through different spaces, and a dream warrior following traditional healing practices. I give lots of thanks to Dr. Jennie Luna, who introduced the term masochil to me. And so yo soy masochil. I'm a queer flowering hand connected to sacredness. It was finding these terms, finding myself in our deep history that allows me to have sure footing in the world. I am in the process of choosing the identities daily. As we know more about ourselves, we find language, and our identities, like our lives, like our communities, are dynamic, vibrant, and ever evolving. You know, I grew up with a strong sense of being Mexicana. My parents instilled a lot of literature and art and history. And as I went through the education system, the public education system here in San Jose, I gained a sense of my Chicana identity, and then the exploration of gender, sexual orientation, and presentation and identity. These are important to me because we live in a very capitalist society that defines people by their productivity. We are in a colonial space, lots of injury due to the conquest that has pushed upon shame to who we are, and we're constantly comparing ourselves to others, and the constant othering that happens to us, that we compartmentalize ourselves, we make ourselves invisible, we make ourselves small, when we really need to be able to find value in just being, in surviving, and in the resistance. So folks who know me well know that anytime I'm in a space, I say that my name is Maribel Martinez, and I pronounce it in that way. I'm not Martinez, there's an accent on the I. I'm not Maribel. And if I'm in other spaces, I will say that my name is Maribel de Mimicni Martinez, and that is my name, and that is how it's pronounced. And I declare that space, right? Because that is how I am known to those who love me, and that's how I am known to this earth. And so there's a tremendous power in language, because we can't be anything that we haven't been before unless we give that name to ourselves. And so in ethnic studies, in counter narratives, as an anthropologist, we assert that I exist because I say so. I name myself because I give it that name. It is true because I lived it. I think we see that, and we see these themes resonating now in our popular culture, in our communities. I think of the film Black Panther, because we're in shelter in place and we watch lots of movies, so I just watched that the other day. In that moment of who are you, right? And they name all who they are, who they're connected to, their relations. I think of the poem Yo Soy Joaquin, and all the deep history of when we have a political movement, we say, todos somos Arizona, or we're all connected. And so it is finding that connection. And I say this in a healing context, because there are wounds from racial trauma, from the conquest, and those wounds come out as internalized devaluation, as an assaulted sense of self, as internalized voicelessness, and a wound of rage. And the way that we begin to heal these wounds of racial trauma are through affirmation, creating space to talk about the racial trauma, to share a story, to begin to tell the racial story, to find validation, and to counteract the devaluation that's happened, and to rechannel that rage. And so when we name ourselves, it's an act of power, it's an act of reclaiming. Latino is a pan-ethnic identity that in some ways we co-created, along with Hispanic, in terms of the census and the way that we count and how we move through different markets and build political power. But it's important to go back and retell how different peoples have arrived to this place, to this country, to this time. We also need to make sure that in that process, we don't erase Indigenous identity, and we don't erase race experiences. The term now Latinx, it comes from the academy, because we don't pronounce the X in Spanish. We don't say Latinx, we say Latinx. We don't pronounce the X like the sh that it is in our language, so we just say Latinesh. And so that it has a deep origin in academia, in English-speaking contexts, and it can create a divide within generations and within economic classes. And so I really encourage the term Latine with an E at the end, because linguistically in the Spanish language, E is that gender neutral ending. And as a two-spirit person, I really want to emphasize that if we're saying Latinx to encompass all genders, then we really have to do the deep work to make sure that we're creating that space. Because sometimes we use Latinx as a catch-all phrase without being very intentional, that we mean folks who identify as male or who are men, folks who identify as women or female, and folks who identify as non-binary or transgender or gender expansive, that we need to be very intentional in the way that we use language, because language is is symbol, it's medicine, it's magic. And so we need to be very intentional, but also to be reminded that because language is fluid and dynamic and a symbol, that it can hold contradiction. So as we say Latinx to be expansive, there's a contradiction because it's also isolating and limiting for folks who aren't aware of that term. And so there's a lot of sharing as to how we come to know these terms, unpacking assumptions, and building connections with each other. So
thank you, Maribel. Thank you so much. And you know, I exist because I say so. I love it. I would add Ike. So powerful. Thank you so much. We're going to now invite, just a quick second. We've been asked to introduce Simón Salazar from the Central Committee, member of Unión del Barrio. Simón is an educator, with lifelong involvement in Raza liberation struggle. Simón, are you here?
Buenas tardes. Yeah, I'm online. My name's Harry Simón Salazar, and thank you for that introduction. Is my sound and video coming through okay, Lisa?
We don't have your video.
Okay. I think because you're pinned at the top, but that's okay.
There we go.
I want to emphasize a few points, and if anything, I'm speaking on behalf of Unión del Barrio. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about my own personal biography or my own identity. I'm going to really privilege and center the collective struggle and the organized struggle and history of Unión del Barrio. I want to double down on something that compa Suarez said earlier, and it's good to see you, compa. It's been a while, and yeah, you're on mute, but that's okay. I think it's a really important moment, especially that this event this discussion is happening based out of San Jose and in California more generally. But I do want to emphasize something that, as I speak on behalf of Unión, it's important that we recenter the discussion of what identity means to us. Identity as a function of power in general, or broadly speaking, or identity as a function of liberation struggle, more specifically, is what I want to really center. Not necessarily an identity. I'm not approaching the question of identity as an anthropologist or sociologist or any kind of academic, although we can get into that kind of discussion. I'm down with that discussion. But if in this space is not an academic-centered space or a nonprofit centered space, I think it's important for us to identify or talk or use conceptualize identity and culture as an instrument or as a vehicle of liberation struggle. And so when we center identity and culture, we know first off that and somebody mentioned Stuart Hall earlier. Stuart Hall, if there's anything that he produced, it wasn't just a really robust kind of assessment of identity. It was because it was a Marxist assessment of identity. And I think that's important for us to summarize it. One that's not necessarily situated at the individual level, but can be understood on scale and as a function of power in general, but as a function of capitalist power. And I'm going to say this in broad strokes, at the risk of being portrayed as a vulgar Marxist or whatever it may be, whatever jacket might want to be thrown. But it's important that we look at the idea that all identities that are not anti-colonial. I'm not saying, and I'm purposely saying, I'm not saying decolonial. I'm saying anti-colonial. Any identity that doesn't emerge within the process of anti-colonial or anti-capitalist struggle, in one way, shape, or form, reproduces existing power relations. So all identities that are not about liberation struggle reproduce systems of oppression as a function of power. I'm not talking about an individual, how we feel about power, but how power operates in the world that we live in today. And so that's why we can have a conversation today in San Jose and be talking about individual interpretations or centering or privileging our own individual understanding of identity, and not bring up the fact that there's kids in cages, there's the hysterectomies that have been happening, there's fascism is descending, the environment, our land is burning, all of these things which are functions of capitalist power or products or derivatives of capitalist neoliberal power. And we still spend so much time talking about our individual identities at the scale of one. So when we talk in Uno del Barrio, we see that the best identity or the identity we have to identify with most urgently in this particular historical moment. It's not to dismiss all the other analysis. It has its space. Aquí cabemos todos, as has been said. But right now, the most urgent is that type of identity that's going to bring us closer to liberation, to freedom, to overturning and resisting this colonial, not decolonial, anti-colonial struggle, right? And there's a difference. So I think, if anything, and I know hopefully they'll be able to talk about this going forward, that we understand that at this point, and I don't want to peg anybody, but this comes up in, for example, Mecha and the different debates that Mecha has been doing about its identity. We're not settlers. We are not. There's nothing for us to gain in the appropriation of white guilt. We are oppressed people. We are colonized people. Colonized people don't get put in cages. Colonizers put colonized people in cages. And as long as it's our gente that are being oppressed and exploited, we understand that our identity as a function of power, not how we feel about power. And I think that's in 4 minutes, there's no way that I could give this the seriousness that it needs to be given. But I think that's our granito de arena that I'd like to share with the group today. That understand we have to be self-critical and self-assess. What is our identity in relationship to power? I'm a media person. I study and analyze media. I'd say if your identity is not in relationship to the masses of your community or even to your own family, if it doesn't emerge out of that process, then probably it's a derivative of social media, which I believe is it's colonizing the realm of identity. And I think that's a different conversation, but I think it has to be thrown in to give it its proper space. So with that, I'll wrap it up. I think I stayed within my 4 minutes, right?
You did great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, gracias for sharing those ideas. Now we're going to call on Manuel Santana, who is a lifelong history nerd, San Jose State University graduate in history and social science teaching, a person of indigenous descent, and East San Jose resident and teaching student at Santa Clara University. Welcome, Manuel.
Okay, so yeah, like he said, my name is Manuel Santana. A lot of you I've met, and a lot of you have been a part of my life, like Dr. Jennie Luna, Adriana, and just a lot of people that I consider elders. I used to know her as Quetzal, but she was very important in my life when I graduated high school in 2001. I started going to Centro Chicomoztoc and playing punk shows there. So I just want to say hi to her, and I hope she's doing well. But in terms of the question, how do I identify? It changes. I identify within, 30 minutes, I can speak to 5 different people and identify 5 different ways. I'm Mexican, I'm Chicano, I'm Chicanx, I'm Indigenous. My mom comes from Filipinos from Guadalajara, which means they were there for hundreds and hundreds of years. So for me, identity has always been a mixed bag. One side of my family comes from Veracruz, and we have Afro-Mexican roots. So all of these things are very important. And so I will identify as whatever I want, whenever I want, because I can, and I often do. So that's the impact of self-naming, is that you have the freedom to be who you want to be when you want to be it, and to reveal parts of yourself as you want to reveal them to who you want to reveal them to. Growing up in the 2000s, I remember when the media, internet stuff just started happening, MySpace and things like that. And it was understood from the get-go that naming your true name online was something you shouldn't do. Unlike today, where people do things to be recognized, like on Instagram and things like that. So the impact of self-naming is strategic for me. It's something that you should utilize as a tool and as a weapon and as a shield to protect yourself. And you know, the impact of Latinx in our communities. I'm going to interpret this question to be just adding the X for transgender and non-gender conforming folks. Because in terms of just Latin, as an indigenous person, as a person who identifies that way, for me, there is no doubt that Latin is something that is a Europeanizing word. And naming yourself that, oh, I'm Latin, I'm Latinx, allies yourself in a way to that kind of indigenous erasure that has been going on for, you know, hundreds and hundreds of years. But in terms of Latinx, I was raised by a transgender man. So my grandfather was born in Guadalajara, biologically male, but always felt, biologically female, always felt different, always did not identify themselves as a woman, did not feel connected to it. So that is my understanding. My grandfather died about 4 years ago, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. And it's something that has given me a perspective that I think a lot of people have difficult trying to connect to, what transgender people are trying to do or what they're attempting to do when they put that X in there. And I respect it, even though I will not understand and will not be able to understand what it's like to be a trans person and be misgendered. I saw that happen to my grandfather everywhere we went, misgendering. And my grandfather was not a, you know, there's no way my grandfather was a PC warrior, was never, you know, SJW, whatever the right wing likes to call them. This person was born in the 30s and was fighting for their identity as male, always. So for me, adding the X, the impact can be positive or negative according to your perspective. And I feel that as non-trans people, non-queer people, non-gender conforming people, we need to try to understand that. We need to speak to people like that. We need to realize that a lot of times we might have a blind spot. And it's a blind spot that has existed in the Chicano movement from the beginning. As some people might know better than me, in the early Chicano movement, there were people who wanted, there were feminists and queer people who wanted to be a part of the movement in a more full way, revealing themselves as feminists, as queer people. And in a lot of instances, as history has proven, they were rejected. And we can't do that. We have to learn from the past, and we have to be open. Like a lot of the other speakers says, we have to be open. That language changes. There was a time when Chicano was a hated term. There was a time when Mexicano was a hated term, because there was a time when the Spaniards came and they told everybody, you're not Mexica, you're not this, you are, you know, a mestizo, or you are this or that. So we need to be really open-minded in terms of language. And I just want to thank everybody for what they shared as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Super grateful for the contribution. This is such a rich conversation. Let's stay in conversation and invite Señora Maria Citlalmina Ortiz to share. Citlalmina is president of Centro Chicomoztoc, Inc., a nonprofit organization militant of Barrio Defense Committee located in San Jose. She has participated in several organizations and committees in the past, including the national organization CASA. Welcome, Citlalmina.
Trying to unmute myself. Yes, thank you very much. The first question, how do you identify? My interpretation is that I identify through the struggle of our gente. I identify with the history that I have learned from my family, from especially from my family, the history of the Mexican people, and that is where I get my identity from. The identity of struggle, the identity of following the footsteps of all those people that that fought and died so that we could exist today. And so I honor all those people. That's where my identity comes from. And that's why I fight for who I am as a Mexicana. And I honor the Chicano movement because that was the extension of the resistance and the liberation of our people that we continue to fight for. You know, that's why I honor the Chicano movement, and I also consider myself a Chicana. The impact of self-naming is just that, the struggle and the liberation of the Chicano Mexicano people, and to tell the world that we are not illegal or whatever term that is being used on us, because of the fact that we're standing on stolen land, stolen by the same invaders that crossed the ocean and committed horrible genocide against our people, and created this mess within us to the point where we don't even know who we are to this day. I recall that after the Chicano movement, the educational system made an effort for a gente not to know who we are. And this is to me, this is the product of our young people not knowing the history of our people. Here in San Jose, for example, I did not see any kind of you know, celebration or recognition of the 16th of September of 1810, which was extremely significant for the liberation of the indigenous and African people, because the African people were also involved. They were the base. The native and the African people were the base of that struggle. And so we have to recognize that, and I carry that with me at all time. The question of these labelings, to me, are imposed by U.S. imperialism, especially with the corporations that utilize these labels on us, so that we can be subservient, not knowing who we are, and just workers, passive workers, and you know, and consumers. This is the approach that the corporations use with these labels that they call Latino, Latino X, or whatever. You know, our people did not even use those words, the X especially. So to me, it's nothing more than an intervention by the U.S. imperialism and its corporate corporations that are, you know, in our lives, and we have to reject that. I call for unity, but I also call for us to know our history as to who we are. Thank you.
Hello everybody, can you guys hear me?
Gracias. Yeah, who's speaking?
Hi, my name is Chema, Jose Maria Leiva.
Oh, okay. We're going to continue with the panel if that's okay. Can you chat your comment or question so that we can keep moving along? We're going to run out of time and we have a few more people that we've invited. Is that okay?
Yeah, for sure. There's going to be a Q&A at the end too, right?
We're trying to fit it in. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Vale. So, well, muchísimas gracias, señora Citlalmina. It's so good to hear so many voices, ¿verdad? And, you know, from the different perspectives, even when those perspectives might feel like there's tension and difference, this is what it means to be in community, to be in dialogue, and to be, you know, and not to shy away from different ideas and different feelings from you know, across generations, but also within generations. So now I'm actually going to call on Diego, our co-facilitator for this panel, to share reflections on these questions. Diego is a, well, we did his introduction already, but I'll let him add a little bit more about who he is. Diego, can you share your name, your pronouns otra vez, and your thoughts on these questions? Gracias.
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Diego. My pronouns are he, him, also they, them, depending on the context. I will try to be as quick as possible. I identify as Chicano Chicanx. I am a direct product of my community, including many members on this panel, which is such a blessing to be a part of alongside with them. I want to speak on the issues that have kind of been brought up throughout the panel on identity as a function of power and the kind of levels of erasure that go alongside that function of power, and how Latinx in itself is not a very politically useful term. And I think it's not so useful because it generalizes such a rich history in Latin America. And I think it does so because it's very useful for a black-white binary to kind of have a blind side for Latin American history, a blind side for indigeneity and the kind of land rights that are inherent in discourses of indigeneity and the relationship that Latin America has had with indigeneity. So I'm drawing a little bit from Dunbar Ortiz when she says that by definition, indigeneity is absent, right? We cannot have a democracy, we cannot have a republic, we cannot have a progress forward if there are actual human beings being devastated, being displaced, being murdered by this project, right, that we call modernity. And so by definition, indigeneity needs to have been something of the past. And alongside that, we also have the southerning of Europe, right? We have the transfer of Western hegemonic power from Spain to the Netherlands, to France, to Britain, to then the United States, right? So you have this power paradigm between systems of power within Europe. And the previous relationships that indigenous people had with the Spanish project of colonialization are now erased with ideas of the southerning of Spain, right? Of the Mexican people, though they are a mestizaje, though they have the same complexities and race paradigms as the United States, they're kind of together in this useless political idea of Latinidad or Hispanic, in the same way that we would say American, but we would know that American politically means white Anglo identity, and that we use hyphens in order to address the power within the United States. So I know it's a lot and I have such limited time, but it is very exciting to see how our identity is completely tied to the functions of power, right? And so that the more nuanced we become with our identity, the more complex our identities become, I think the more human we actually recover from our histories of conquest. I think Chicano is a beautiful legacy of resistance, of people dealing with a history of erasure, but also knowing that identity and that being comes from us, right? And so that what I see Chicanx, Chicano looking like in 50 years is an identity that is centered around a politic, right? Centered around an anti-colonial perspective that isn't necessarily tied to an ethnicity, because our ethnicities are so complex, our histories are so mixed, right? Our mestizaje, the gift of Latin America is that our mestizaje does not allow us to become nationalist in the same way other homogenous, which no group is homogenous, but perceived homogenous groups can be. So thank you so much for the time, such a beautiful conversation. I hope we can continue it.
Thank you, Diego, for your palabra. I want to ask Nava to now to share some reflections on these questions. Nava is a student, an artist, and an organizer born and raised in the city of San Jose. Welcome, Nava.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm trying to find the questions in the chat. I might have missed them a little bit. But starting off, first and foremost, the way that I identify is, God, such a nightmare. Just because I know that we had somebody else that was speaking a bit earlier. I believe it was Maribel, who was talking about being two-spirit. And they're speaking about experiences of gender and not strictly fitting into a binary. And like, that really resonated with me. Because I mean, what I know right away is when I see somebody in my community, you know, I live in an area that's like quote unquote like 90% Hispanic. That's what you'll find when you look at the demographics info of the city. I know that when I look at somebody else in their eye, I see that's somebody that's my community. You know, it's not really something that I can define. It's not really something that I can, you know, quantify what it really is. But I know that when I see my neighbor, I might not have like spoken to them as much as I probably should have, but I know that like there's a connection there. And really, like it's something that I've learned, that I know that the connection is there. I know that we are in that community. Simply the language that I'm going to use to describe that is something that I'm going to figure out in time. That's kind of something that I accepted. Because for me, my childhood was from like 2006 to 2015. So like that sort of era from when I'm coming in. And, you know, ideas of what being Chicano, Mexicano, Latinidad, so on and so forth, all these different words have such a like radically different meaning from what they were in the 90s or the 70s or the 50s. So when I was coming up, I didn't really have like somebody had mentioned that they had grown up around elders. I never really had that in a lot of senses, because we were kind of cut off, me and my family, for a lot of various different reasons, whether it be related to misogyny, homophobia, so on and so forth. So I think that when it comes to identity, I've learned that I have the freedom to figure that out. And I've learned that it's going to be immensely confusing and chaotic and just a big mess that I have to, it's like, you know, like, I don't know if you ever had like charger cables all get tangled in a cabinet and you have to like slowly kind of undo the cables. That's essentially what I'm trying to do, where little by little I'm undoing these different things, because it's undeniable that there is white supremacy in our history. There is misogyny, patriarchy, and so on and so forth. And me figuring out what parts of it I need to keep and what parts of it I need to leave behind is something that I'm going to do for, I think, the rest of my life. In terms of the impact of self-naming, everybody has said it. It's massively important. You know, the fact that you have the power to name yourself, to say who you are. Somebody, we had Guillermo speaking about self-determination earlier. Massively important, because naming yourself is part of self-determination. So I just got the 1 minute warning. What is the impact of the term Latinx community, especially queer identity, Indigenous identity? So honestly, to be honest, we just had a professor and crazy college educated people speak onto that answer a lot better than I could. But in terms of, I guess, summarizing what the impact of the term Latinx in our community is, I think that in time, we're going to figure out the language that we need to define ourselves. I think that as long as we continue to have good faith conversations, keep in mind, sometimes you're not supposed to talk with certain people because they're not coming at you the right way. But as long as we continue to have good faith conversations with each other as to how we're going to speak to ourselves, how we're going to define ourselves, then that's a conversation that's going to be continuing for a long time. And it's not a bad thing to not have something concrete right away. Sometimes it's okay to understand, I don't have enough information, you don't have enough information, but if we pool our knowledge together, then we can actually come to a clearer conclusion. So this isn't just young people lead the way, older people lead the way, it's us as a community in a sense. So I'm gonna keep that short. I'll let this go to the next person.
Thank you, Nava. Thank you for that wisdom. I just really want to do a time check. Diego, if it's okay, sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, absolutely.
We knew we were ambitious with so many panelists, but we really thought, this conversation, it's expansive and there's just so many voices. And so we want to ask permission to go to about 1:15. We want to allow some space for question and answer and just do some call outs. So is that okay with folks? Hope so. If not, sign off if you have to. But I just wanted to make that kind of time check. So I want to hand it back to Diego to take us to the end. Thank you, Diego.
Okay, thank you. We have a few more speakers. Next, we have Jessica Hurtado to share with us. Jessica is Colonel and Officer of Communications of the Brown Beret National Organization, La Causa, which was founded in 1967. You can read a fuller bio in the chat. Welcome, Jessica. I think you're on mute, Jessica. You're on mute?
Thank you, thank you. A lot of information that I've been hearing. I've been on this since 10:30, so a lot of conversations, a lot of spins on what we're talking about. What you didn't mention is that I'm also the great niece of Pancho Villa. Many of my ancestors fought in the Mexican Revolution. My Gachupino grandfather, he was Secretary of Transportation under the presidency of Adolfo Cortines. A large portion of the railroad system in Mexico was due to my grandfather's leadership. So a lot of political, a lot of warrior in my blood. I'm also Purepecha by ways of Yurecuaro, Michoacan. And first out, I'm with the Brown Berets, and my husband and I are very, we're on the front lines. We're physically very active, boots on the ground. And I want to just say this because I know that there's a lot of nonprofits, a lot of organizing out there, a lot of community organizations, but we're losing the fight out there. And when I say that about the streets. We're losing ground. The police are hitting back harder. They are more militarized now than they have been in the past 45 years. The POA is gaining strength. They're getting angry because they're losing their whiteness and it's being taken out on us. And I think it's important that you know that from somebody, because I'm coming from the perspective of the streets and what's going on there. My husband and I are physically on the streets on a weekly basis, continuing to fight for the Chicano Mexicano community, and it's not pretty out there. My personal story, identity-wise, my parents were born in Mexico, both college educated. My father actually played professional soccer with the Atlas de Guadalajara. And as a child, I was not allowed, or my siblings, to use the Chicano identity. It was considered to be degrading and considered to be of lower quality person. However, I was confused because I was born here, and I was called wetback, spic, wetback to Mexico. So when my parents announced that we would be visiting our family in Mexico for the first time, I was about 12, I think. So I was excited because I thought I was going back. I thought I was going back to our motherland, and I was going to feel that I finally belonged somewhere. And when we got to Mexico, my family in Mexico referred to my siblings and I as Yankees. We were rejected in a very ugly way and in a very traumatic way. So hence my feeling that I really was Chicana, because I was rejected here and I was rejected in Mexico. But again, that being forbidden to use that type of term, it was always Mexican American, is what I was, I guess, forced to use. And it wasn't until a few years ago, actually, when I met my husband, that we had a very candid conversation about what it is to be Chicano, that I finally felt that I have found my true identity. So I identify as a Chicana, Mexicana, Indigena. I think this is a great conversation that we're having. It's an important conversation. There is a lot of confusion out there. And I think these conversations need to be had. And I hope that you continue with them. And in particular, I'm actually getting my BA in journalism. And I do a lot of research. And we have a lot of work to do in our communities. We're not better off today than we were back when the Chicano movement started. Actually, we're in a worse place. And I think we need to start to reach out to our people in that aspect, in that politically, the foot on our neck is a lot tighter. And we need to come together, and we need to join forces with all Central, South America. I keep hearing that there's not enough of us. That's why we have to join together with other ethnicities. There are more than enough of us on this continent. And so I would like to see a movement where we're working more with our Central and American brothers and sisters, nuestra gente de las islas, and focus on that, because we are very separated from them. We are very divided. We keep putting up these walls with our people from Central and South America because they tend to use the Latino Hispano identity, and we're shutting them out. And we should not be doing that. We need to, I know personal identity is important, but overall, as somebody that's out on the streets all the time fighting and seeing the separation and seeing how they are not willing to join with us because of this wall that we're building by rejecting Latino and Hispanos, it's detrimental to our survival, believe it or not. So I would like in the future to have more conversation on that aspect as well. So I'll go ahead and give up. If I have any time left, I'll give it up, because then I can go on for hours.
Yeah, thank you so much. Gracias, Jessica. Finally, our last but not least is Victor Vasquez. Victor Vasquez was born in Tuxpan, Jalisco, a small town southwest of Guadalajara, Jalisco. He was raised in Oakland, California, and attended college at UC Berkeley. Welcome, Victor.
Thank you so much for all the knowledge, the work that you put in to put this presentation together. And I know that all the work that you do every day for the Hausa, right? And so just briefly, for me, in terms of identity, I'm a product of my conditions in the movement. My mother is a janitor, a babysitter, a house cleaner. I grew up in a small town and, landed in Oakland, California because of economic and political conditions, right? That push our people up to this part of the continent. And now I'm in San Jose, so full transparency. I'm here to learn as much as to share what I know, right? And for me, I grew up as a 15-year-old, or as someone thrown into the streets of Oakland, California, and going from a small town to realize that you knew your community, yeah, there's poverty, but you also had this sense of freedom of being also in a space where people took care of each other. You go to Oakland, California, the violence created by the conditions is so harsh that people don't allow their children to do that. So from then on, my first lesson of politics was that America wasn't about freedom. America was about violence and a sense of non-liberation, right? So as a youngster, I grew up and was involved in different things, and I learned about different struggles from my Black, Indigenous, and Asian community members in Oakland, California, and their struggle and their liberation. So I started to think more about what was our liberation. So when Jennie's folks are fighting, I'm seeing them on TV, I'm seeing them on the streets as a young person, as a kid, and I'm feeling a sense of hope because in California at that time, the whole state voted to be against Mexicanos and escaped us and put Prop 187, 229, 227, all these different legal ways of attacking us, right? And making us the problem. And so growing up, I think those conditions shaped my reality and how I became politically aware, not just identity aware, but politically aware. And those two things are definitely not exclusive of each other. So I grew up calling myself a Chicano, and I'm still a Chicano. Even today, what we see today on the streets reinforces that. And I think the power of naming ourselves, I agree with what people are saying. At the end of the day, we talk about identity as a product, right? And a product of liberation. But my question to us is, what type of liberation are we talking about? What type of nation do we want to build, right? And what are we going to do? What are the strategies to get there? And are those strategies just like on a talking surface, or are we actually implementing them on an everyday level in our communities, right? And I think it's necessary to have those conversations as much as we talk about this either or. Do we name ourselves? Are we revolutionary or not, right? So can we do it in a way that we actually building a future, a vision of what type of liberation that we want to see based on all the things that we have already learned for a community? Because, you know, today, right, Chicanos are out there marching in San Jose, right? Fighting for Black lives, fighting for brown lives, fighting from a different reality, a different system, and that's happening on the streets, boots on the ground, right? And for a lot of our gente, like that grew up like my mother, like what we care about is that our kids have a public education that's not capitalistic, that's not gonna overcharge us, that's gonna teach us about ourselves and who we are. We care about having a home and a roof in our heads. We care about being able to feel like we belong and that we're full human beings, and that, you know, we don't have to worry about police or ICE or anything like that. Those are, for me, those are my things. And that our environment, right? Right now, we haven't even talked about the environment that this system is creating. So for us, it matters that we have a vision of what society needs to be, what we're fighting for, and that it's inclusive of all people, right? And so I think that takes us to the last part that, you know, I understand, like, you know, the Latinx conversation is very important, I think, because it brought up the idea of making sure that when we commit to this liberation, that we're committing to a queer liberation, that we're committing to a liberation for all. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You know, I think that the Latin part of Latinx is connected to the white supremacy legacies that we've reject, right? But I think at the end of the day, if our purpose is liberation, the type of liberation that we can agree on, let's put in the work and effort, and we can unify. You can call yourself whatever you want. I think for me, it matters is what type of liberation we're building, and what we agree on is the future that we want to see.
Thank you so much, Victor. And with that, we're going to end the panel portion of our event. So many incredible voices, ideas, experiences. I want to pass the mic back to our MCs, Señora Citlalmina and Nava. Muchísimas gracias todos for hanging in there and for sharing from the heart.
Thank you again.
You're muted, señora Quetzal.
Thank you so much, compañeros y compañeras that served as panelists. You know, this was a good discussion, and it allows us to see what people are thinking, what their experiences are, what our experiences are, where we're coming from, and where we want to go. So I hope that this discussion continues. only because we have to, move forward as an organized people, just like our people did back in 1810, as an organized force to make fundamental changes towards a new society that will be directed and guided by the working poor, by the working people, the productive people. So now we are going to